Welcome to this Q&A. This is the part 2 or supplement to the main video about the BigClive.com supercomputer. Kind of hard to read the text. So this video I will be going through about 30 questions. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get through them. It might only get me halfway through this and then I'll just stop recording and that'll be it. But we'll see how it goes. And of course, while I'm doing the Q&A, I will be assembling all the parts onto this circuit board. So let's get straight into it. The first question is from, or I should say the 00 question, the double odd question, is from Casey, myself. And Casey asks, why are you on YouTube? That is a very good question. Why am I on YouTube? Well, my first video went up, I think back in 2018. It was just a dumb 11-second video of me revving my Z4 and, you know, just for laughs, just putting the video up there just to see if it would get any views. And it did. It got a couple hundred views within the first, year or so. And then once the, we'll just say, current global events hit in early 2020, I was like, what would be really fun is just to make some YouTube videos, because to me, YouTube is a give and take system. And all my life, I've been taking from YouTube. I've been, taking all of the knowledge that other people share, and I've never given anything back. Not that I have anything great to share myself, but I figure maybe somebody can get something out of what I have. They can at least learn from my mistakes, right? So my first video, I believe, was on the soldering iron you see here in the top left of the shot. Was not a fantastic video, but it was a start, right? I believe it was all in one take as well. A lot of my first videos were all in one take without a single cut, and I kind of liked that. I kind of miss doing that. But I also understand that brevity is important, and not everyone wants to hear every pause, every and that I utter. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of was trying to copy what I've seen from other creators do. And that can only really get you so far, because eventually you just have to start making your own thing, do things your own way. And your voice will come out through your videos eventually. You just need to find it. And I kind of just went through the mentality of fake it till you make it. And I'm still faking it. Which must mean I haven't made it yet. Another reason why I'm on YouTube is to document the things that I do in my life. I don't think I've ever done a YouTube video that was for the sake of doing the YouTube video. All of my YouTube videos are based on doing things that I do anyway. They're things that I would have done, or things I would have purchased, things I would have taken apart or modified, regardless of the YouTube video possibility. I just decided, since I'm doing this anyway, why don't I make a video about it? And it documents it for myself for the future. So, I know this might sound bad with, it might sound bad from your perspective as a viewer, but I don't make these videos for you so much as I make them for myself, just so it's something that I can look back on. And if I'm not, if I was trying to make these videos for the viewers, and if I was trying to go after YouTube fame, I would be a very unhappy person. Because, while my videos are definitely not high effort, I don't do fancy editing, I don't do countless hours of research, and I don't write scripts. I just kind of, I pretty much wing it every time. I mean, I do some research with some videos, and, I research the topics that I'm talking about only as far as it pertains to me accomplishing the goal that I want. It's very rare, very seldom that I ever, again, do research for the video for the sake of the video. I think the only one that I've put significant research into was the video about why you should not buy the aluminum oil filter caps for the BMW N52 engines, and I guess that applies to the M54 engine as well. So, I mean, I'm very happy with how my channel has done over the past year, and I haven't even done, officially been doing videos for a year yet, because, it was, I think, March 18th was the first video upload on the soldering iron over here. And I've already got, is it 400 something subscribers now? And I must say, if you are subscribed to this channel, thank you very much. That goes a long way. If you've ever viewed my videos, left a like or left a dislike or left a comment, that does mean a lot to me, because it's one thing to put the videos up there and then, I can go back and look at them, but when I see that other people have, either enjoyed them or hated them or whatever they feel about the video, that means a lot more to me, because it shows that other people are asking the same questions that I'm asking, interested in the same things that I'm interested in. And, that's what makes it more worth it to me, is some of that interaction with other people. And I think my channel has accumulated like 60,000 something total views. I must say, this solder right here is already better than even that nicer cheap solder. It just flows so well. Actually, you know what I should do? Something I learned from making the other supercomputer, is start close to you and then work your way away from you. That way I'm getting closer to the source of the solder roll, and I don't have to keep pulling more solder out as I go. Kind of, as I use it, the length gets shorter. So I just pull out a big length, start towards me, then work away. And then by the time I'm at that end of the circuit board, it's short enough where I can just, leave the string of solder hanging. Wow, this stuff flows so nicely. I wish I would have bought some proper solder sooner. So back to that question, why am I on YouTube? I think that pretty much sums it up. There is a sub-question that could be asked, but I think I left that one at the end after the viewer question. So let's go into the first viewer question. And this question is one of my most asked, or most frequently asked questions on this channel. And it refers to my motorcycle videos, and in particular my CB500F. So Angela Evans asks, or says, "Hi Casey, thanks for the great video. I have a 2015 CB500FA. The FA is the ABS model. And she says, I'm wondering if you can tell me what you have for a windscreen. I do a lot of moto camping, and my windscreen is too small. Yours looks better. How does it work for you? Thanks, from Angela in Ontario, Canada." So, well, greetings, Angela. I love hearing from international viewers, because it's really cool to see people around the world that are watching this stuff as well. So the windscreen that is on my CB500F is from a company called GP Composite. I have not been able to find their website. I was only able to find a link to their product through Amazon. And that windscreen was on the bike when I got it. I did not purchase that windscreen or install it, but it can be found on there. I think it's about $100, maybe a little over $100. And how does it work for me? I say overall it works very great. It does not vibrate around a lot. It doesn't shake and move around as you're riding along. It takes all the wind pressure off my chest. But because I am 5'10", so I'm not super tall, but for the size of that windscreen, the windscreen ends at a place where the wind just goes straight into my face. And it is a lot of pressure and wind on my face, and it's very loud. So if you are a shorter rider, and I'm going to make the assumption that Angela Evans is a woman, so she is most likely shorter, she would probably benefit from that even more. And, you know, that would probably be the perfect windscreen, I think, for that bike, especially since, you know, if you've seen my CB500F, I put some adventure bike like bits on it. I would say it's more a commuter style bike, especially, you know, with the windscreen and hand guards. You know, we offer a lot of wind protection, and, you know, I think that would be the perfect setup for that bike for anybody who wants a windscreen. $100 is not very much money, you know, so it's not super expensive, and it still gets the job done. I apologize for that cut there. So the next question, this is another one of the most popular and most asked questions on the channel, and it is from Leonard Emilian, who says, "Great video. As I'm attempting to dip my toes into crossovers myself, I'd like to ask how did you determine the values of the inductors? Many thanks." Well, Leonard, like many others on the channel, that is a big question. And you use something, it's a multimeter that is called an LCR meter. L, which represents inductance, C, which represents capacitance, and R, which represents resistance. It's sort of like just a normal multimeter, but, you know, it measures different things. And you should desolder all of the components and measure them individually. But you're really just looking for the nominal value, and you can get close enough to the nominal value with it still in the circuit. And you can usually read the capacitors and you can usually read the resistors, but if it's not labeled, that meter will give you all the information you need for determining the values on a crossover. You know, I figure it was actually a little bit slower and tougher to feed through the components with it, you know, with trying to hold it. So I've got a little box here to stand it up so I can feed resistors through a little more easily. Is there anything else I need to say about the LCR meters? Not really. You can also try to research the speaker and research the crossover that you're looking for and see if someone's already written an article or done a video on it. That way you don't need to necessarily measure it yourself. You can see if the manufacturer has published information about what the values are. That almost never happens. They have no reason to tell you what the values of the components are in the crossover. Obviously, like, them telling you that does not make them more money. It might make them lose money, possibly. I don't really see how that's too relevant either, but they're probably not going to tell you. So you can also, if instead of disassembling the speaker you have, if you can find a picture of it disassembled or the picture of the crossover online, just through, you know, like a Google image search or something, that's also very helpful to see what's inside the speaker without having to first take it apart. So the next question here is from Sharath Maka. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but when do I ever pronounce things correctly? He says, "I have some codes. Can you please help me how to diagnose this issue?" This is in reference to my video on the M54 and fixing the DC valve for $1, which is basically just buy an O-ring, assuming the rest of the valve is decent. And my answer to this is I really can't help you diagnose a problem, especially with a question that vague. And it's not so much that I'm trying to be rude or anything, but the M54, in terms of getting the lean codes or misfire codes, mainly the lean codes, that can come from just about anywhere in that engine bay, and it is very difficult to determine where it's coming from without actually being there in person to inspect everything and to check the fuel trims. It's really something you've got to either do yourself or have someone local to you do in person. So if you have a specific question, a very specific question about something that's going on, I would maybe be able to answer it. But even then, it's pretty tough without being there with the car. So and maybe I can circle back to the first question, the one that I asked myself, which is, why are you on YouTube? I want to show people that you can do all this stuff yourself. It is not beyond you to learn some of these skills, like for automotive, to learn how to fix your own car, to learn the nuances of the engine that's in your car, or when it comes to electronics or speakers. You can upgrade these things yourself. You don't, you don't need to have me show you how to do it necessarily. Although, yes, I'm here to show you how I do mine. Just take the knowledge you learn from my video, and especially not just mine. Watch other people's videos too. Learn as much as you can about the subject, and then once you've learned all that, then if you feel comfortable, go and try and upgrade your own speakers. I'd say your first attempt should be on a speaker you don't really care about so much, or a speaker you're willing to potentially destroy, because if you accidentally drop something on a woofer cone, or if you keep the soldering iron on the terminals for too long, you could potentially melt or ruin something. Little mistakes can pop up here and there that if it's on a nice speaker, you'd be hurting, you'd be crying if you made a mistake. So start out on something cheap, something you're okay with potentially destroying. So all that circling back to trouble codes. There's not really much I can do to help you diagnose a specific trouble code. Not because I don't want to, it's just it's not possible from me here through the internet. The next question number 3, is from Stefan Gragu. Maybe I'm making that over Germanicized, but Stefan's question here is, tell me please, the first generation N52 engine, magnesium valve cover, is better option than second generation N52? Thank you. So, for those of you that are unaware, the N52, or November 52 engine from BMW, has a few different variants. The first version had a magnesium valve cover and had a CCV system nearly identical to the M54 or Mike 54 engine, where it was an external air oil separator underneath the intake manifold. And after a year or two of the N52 being released, BMW decided that they were going to change the design to improve it, and they did. They integrated the... Let's see if I'm in frame. Yeah, good enough. They integrated the CCV system into the valve cover. And while this is problematic in some ways, it actually really helps in other ways. Part of the problem with the CCV system is that it regularly clogs up with that contaminated oil, the oil that's contaminated with moisture. It turns that yellowy, white, milky, mayo-y sort of consistency, and that clogs up the system. And on the M54, like I experienced, that can actually, due to the design of the engine, suck oil directly out of the oil pan into the cylinders, which is really not good. And with the CCV being integrated into the plastic valve cover of the revision of the N52, they were able to keep more heat in the CCV system and significantly reduce the amount of clogging that happens. And that really only happens in cold climates with cold temperatures. It's not such a big deal if you live in Arizona or California or Florida, where the temperatures rarely get below freezing. But for those of us that live in cold climates, such as myself, it can become a problem, and for me it has. But there are other nuances, other changes that were made between the two versions, and I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. I think some of them were tuning changes. They, retuned how the Valvetronic system worked. They retuned the DISA system a little bit. I think primarily electronically, and I believe in the second version they also started making the hollow hydroformed camshafts. Again, it's been a long time since I've researched the differences between the two engines, so if I'm a little bit wrong on that, feel free to, correct me in the comments. I'd like to have the right information out there. But is one better than the other? I do think the second version, the version with the plastic valve cover, is the better of the two engines. The only downside is the plastic valve cover does crack over time. The magnesium valve cover theoretically should never crack or have any, problems with longevity. And the reason why I switched to the magnesium valve cover was simply for longevity. I plan to keep the Z4 until it's no longer viable or economical for me to own it, even if I will engine swap that car to keep it going. I'd have to total the car, or the car would have to rust out before I would be willing to get rid of it. At least that's my feeling now. I might feel different in the future, but that's how I feel right now. So with me wanting to make the car as future-proofed as possible, I figure, I don't know how much longer BMW suppliers are going to be keeping factories open for those plastic valve covers. So I want to avoid having to ever need a plastic valve cover ever again by switching to the magnesium one and running a catch can. Not the most legal thing, depending on your area, so check your local laws before you start messing with stuff. But that's why I wanted to do that, and I think that explains a little bit about the differences between the first gen and the second gen of the N52. The next question here is from Witana, who says, thanks for this, super helpful. Regarding the green O-ring, this is also about the M54 engine video. I wonder if it's the same one as the one that fits the coolant temperature sensor, aka auxiliary fan switch. The part number is 13621433077 Sierra. In any case, I think you don't want to be replacing green O-rings with black ones, or so I've been told. The green ones are coolant, or are resistant to coolant. Where am I? Resistors. Where are my resistors? They're hidden. There they are. So yes, to answer that question, I'm not sure if they're the same part number. It's very likely that they are, because to reduce the bill of materials, or the BOM, you would want to have as many parts the same on the vehicle as possible, and something as simple as an O-ring, if you can spec the same O-ring for two different parts, definitely do it. But as far as, keeping the like colors together, like he said, to my knowledge, you do want to keep the colors the same. But if you look at the spec sheet for a Buna N O-ring, it is resistant to pretty much anything in an engine bay. So there's no reason why you couldn't use a black Buna N O-ring. The color might also have to do with the temperature that it's rated for. So we'll see if I encounter any issues with the Buna N O-rings that I installed on my 5 Series. And like everything else, if I ever encounter any issues, or likewise any positive things, I'll definitely do update videos on certain things that I do. So that was a very good question by Witana. The next question, question number 5, is from Pinch and Squeal. That's a good username. who asks, is that the same spring system they use on the Onion? Now, this is in reference to the video I did about disassembling, cleaning, and re-oiling my Kershaw Leek knife, which is a fantastic knife, by the way. If you like knives and you want a good knife, definitely get a Kershaw Leek. I have been extremely happy with it. The question about that being the same spring, because it's a spring assist knife, I'm not sure if it's the same part. Like I said for the previous question, it makes sense for manufacturing that they would use the same exact spring for all of the knives, and because that would make manufacturing and mass production a lot easier. But I can't confirm that. I've never had the knife called the Onion. But being that the Leek is a Ken Onion designed knife, it would lead me to also believe that it is very similar. But are the part numbers the same? I don't really know. The next question from Piano Forte. Piano Forte asks, hello, many thanks for your video. If not upgrade crossover, does tough dampening significantly change sound? Going to damp mine with wool felt, should I expect wow effect after that? Or dampening just a half measure? There might be a little bit of a translation problem there. Possibly one of those fun Google Translate results. But I believe the question is, if you're not going to upgrade the crossover, is just adding some dampening material inside the speaker good enough, or is it just a half measure? That is an excellent question. I would say it is definitely a half measure, just like upgrading only the crossover is a half measure. If you upgrade the crossover in your speaker, you will get some improvement. It's probably one of the bigger improvements you'll see. But when it comes to audio, you have to improve everything by a little bit to get a big difference. Or when you improve everything by a little bit, you'll see a big difference. And when the enclosure of a speaker is vibrating a lot, that means that the box of the speaker is creating sound that is different from what the woofer or the tweeter is doing. Primarily the woofer, because that's where most of the vibration is going to come from. And that's not good. That's going to change the sound. It's going to color the sound. It's going to make the output signal that comes to your ear much more different from the input signal that is intended. And specifically saying wool felt, I don't know what that's really going to do. It might be somewhat equivalent to adding the blanket stuffing, where it acts to dampen out the air waves, the compression waves inside the enclosure. It might help to dampen those out, but it's not going to do much to dampen out the MDF walls of the speaker. Where did this one come from? Up here. And that's why I always kind of splay out the leads a little bit so that the components stay nice and, relatively tight against the board as I go. The first one, the first supercomputer I made took me about 4 hours to complete in total. I wasn't in any rush. It was the first one I had done, so I was kind of trying to figure out what the easiest way would be to make it and kind of figuring out my process. This one, we'll see if it goes any faster, but they are a lot of work. The red one that I showed in the other video was actually a gift to someone, and Clive said that you want to be careful about who you offer these up as gifts to because they're a lot of work to make, and I will agree with that, although it isn't as much work as I thought it was going to be. I think 4 hours is pretty reasonable if you're going to, put, some good time into making something for someone as a gift. because as you can see, like, the most time is just put into putting the components on the board. Once you get to soldering, you can move up and down the board pretty quickly. And the reason why I'm doing it one row at a time is so that I don't have to, you know, go in and reach around all the leads that haven't been cropped off yet. It just, you know, seems like the best way to do it for me. But you are free to do this however you want. If you make one of these, it is your supercomputer, it is your board. Don't let anyone tell you how you should do it. Now, if you're gonna actually, you know, make an electronic device of some kind for a purpose that is meant, you know, for saving people's lives or is critical to some mission, then it really does matter. That's when it matters that you're getting everything perfect on the board. You're not overheating components. You're not stressing the solder joints. You're using the top quality components. That's when that stuff matters. But this is, for lack of a better term, it's a toy. It doesn't need to be, you know, top-notch quality. This is all just for fun and practice and for the joys of electronics. So that ends my first page of questions. Let's go on to page 2. All right, the next question is from a viewer called Seamus. Seamus asks, wonder how well this, referring to the Reckless 40, would work on a CB500X for hammock camping. The Reckless 40 is a pannier system offered by a company called Moscow Moto. They are one of the most highly regarded pannier companies out there that I know of, and their stuff, it lasts a long time. It is super durable. It is super heavy duty. It is the stuff you want. And I weighed my Reckless 40 empty recently. It weighs 15 pounds, which is like that's ridiculous. Well, I take that back. It's the Reckless 40, the 2 side bags, 2 stingers, and 1 separate dry bag. So the Reckless 40 with 1 stinger and the 2 dry bags probably weighs closer to 12 pounds. So maybe that doesn't sound quite as bad, but that is a lot of weight before you even start adding your luggage to it. But to, you know, answer the question of would it be good for hammock camping? And again, I would say absolutely. The Reckless 40 does not hold a lot of stuff. 40 liters might sound like quite a bit, but that space dries up really, really quickly. And my only real disappointment about the Reckless 40 is that the 2 side bags and the 8-liter stinger, while the total volume is really good at 40 liters, each individual bag is pretty small, so you'd have a hard time fitting a full sleeping bag or, you know, any of the things you would really want that are bigger. So that aside, with Seamus's question being about hammock camping, well, now that you don't have to put a tent in there, I think that would be a really good way to go, because it is very small, it's very light, and it can carry enough stuff for, you know, if you're thinking of doing hammock camping, you are wanting to do ultra lightweight moto camping, where you're trying to pare down all of your equipment as low as you can go. That is an assumption I'm making, but I mean, if you weren't interested in ultra lightweight, you would definitely pack like a 2-person tent, even if you're only 1 person. And, you know, specifically on the CB500X, well, I've never ridden the CB500X, but from the images that I've seen and from what I've seen of other people putting on it, the seat on the CB500X is a little narrower than the CB500F. because in the CB500F, where the pillion seat is, it, you know, has almost some wide hips, let's say, before it narrows down to where, you know, the main driver would sit. And right where that kind of a diamond shape is right where the panniers would have to go. And that makes I'll say the kind of the holster to where the dry bag goes into bent a little bit, and then the dry bag doesn't want to slide in perfectly straight. It makes it more difficult to get a full bag in there. Where the CB500X, I believe, is more, it looks a little bit more like a Dual Sport or a KLR, where it doesn't have that weird wide hip thing going on. And I feel like it would work a lot better on the CB500X compared to the F. So, long story short there, I think, yes, it would work very well for hammock moto camping. This is a very tedious operation to get these in, but it's also very relaxing if you just, you know, if you're not worried about how quickly you're getting the whole thing together, if it's just a nice relaxing solder session with electronics, it's, you know, it's therapeutic. I enjoy this. That's kind of why I went with the big supercomputer and not the smaller, you know, what is it, like 4x7 size. Even though this one is, you know, a lot more work and a lot more components, I just thought, you know, I'll be able to spend more time with it. I think it'll be more fun. And at the end, you get a giant panel of LEDs flashing away. It's, you know, these things are super cool. Huge thanks to Big Clive for providing these for free for everyone to go and get. Or I should say the design files are free. You can go to his website. I'll link to his website down below in this video and in the other main video. To where you can download the zip file and then upload it to JLC PCBs, who I got these through. I got these, they were custom made in China and then shipped to my home here in southern Minnesota. Within 3 days, I had them in my hands. That was incredible. I am blown away. For the price you pay, it is really great. So the next question, question number 8, is from M. Ophi, who says, terrible, just don't use a screwdriver. There are so many other tools that will serve and are made of plastic. Now this is a comment in reference to my video on the Klipsch R15M teardown and upgrades, where I used one of my small flathead screwdrivers to pop off the cover that covers up the fasteners for the woofer. Well, if you are not careful, if you're not gentle, yes, a metal screwdriver will destroy trim on a speaker or literally on anything, which is why they make trim removal tools for cars that are made of plastic. And I would agree, there are better tools for that. But that tool, I know how to use it in a way that doesn't destroy what I'm trying to take apart, because I am careful. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. I don't mind using the metal screwdriver. All right, question number 9 here is from a Korean guy, and I cannot pronounce this name. I apologize. I wouldn't even know where to start. But a Korean viewer asks, and again, this is another, probably a Google Translate thing. I'm using the same speaker. I took it apart to change the speaker color. Can I know the name of the component that was replaced? Thank you for the information. I'm not good at listening because I'm Korean. So I'm going to translate that again into what I would say is normal speaking English. So he's using the same speaker. He took the speaker apart because he wants to change the sound of the speaker, and he's wondering what the name of the component or components are that I replaced to do the upgrade that I did. This one is very easy, and if you're a beginner to speakers, this is a reasonable question to ask. There are only 3 types of components in a speaker crossover. Most typically, it's possible that there are others in other speakers, but for the most part, there is only a resistor, a capacitor, and an inductor. The purpose of a resistor is to limit the current through any given portion of the crossover. In your standard budget speaker crossover, you'll find 3 components on the tweeter circuit. You'll find a series resistor, you'll have a series capacitor, and a parallel inductor. What the capacitor does is it prevents low current or low frequencies from passing through in an AC configuration, of course, because an audio signal is alternating current, not direct current. And an inductor will prevent high frequencies from getting through. And by changing the values of your resistor, your capacitor, and your inductor, you will change the frequency response, and you will change the impedance, which is the AC equivalent to resistance, to use layman's terms. And that will change how the speaker sounds. And very small changes to those values can make very large differences in the frequency response and the impedance. And those things are very important to the sound of the speaker. So you can't just go and whack any old value inductors and resistors and capacitors in the crossover speaker and think it's just going to turn out all great. That's why crossover calculators online do not work at all. And that's even why crossover simulators don't really work all that well. I've made 3 custom speakers from scratch on my own, but I used some crossover simulation software, which is good. It'll get you in the ballpark, but if you don't have the equipment to, if you don't have a calibrated microphone to measure the frequency response afterwards and see what the actual speaker is doing, you're never going to make a speaker that sounds great, because the whole system is not being taken into account with that crossover simulator. And I do not have the tools nor the software to actually design and develop my own crossovers, and that's why I haven't had a lot of success, and I haven't made any videos about the custom speakers I've made. Is just the information I have on that is not going to really be helpful to most people. So again, that's an excellent question to ask, is what components are in a crossover. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will be right back. Thank you for your wonderful patience there. My throat is getting a little hoarse from talking so much over the last few days, and I decided to make myself a nice hot cocoa here. So I will be able to have this to both keep me warm and keep my throat from drying out so much. That is some really good stuff. Hopefully I don't forget to drink it and then it gets all cold. Where was I? Oh yes, so next round of resistors. It gets harder the more towards the center you get, because the board wants to keep tipping over. The way I made that hot cocoa was with half the mug full of whole milk and then half full of hot water, and then I just put it in the microwave for about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, however long I needed until it felt like it was the right temp. I added 2 packets of pre-made cocoa mix because I am lazy, and then I added literally just a splash of something called Ice Hole Mint. It's I believe it's a schnapps. There's barely any, in terms of percentage, that hot cocoa there has basically no alcohol in it. It's mainly just for the mint flavor, because I didn't have anything else to flavor it with mint, because I love mint and chocolate. I am a sucker for mint and chocolate. Next question here from Peter Pixo, who says, great content. Hope it will make 500k views over time. Well, thank you, Peter Pixo. That is a very kind thing to say. I don't know if it'll ever get that big, but that's, very optimistic. So continuing what he was saying, I did my upgrade with way cheaper speakers, very skeptical while doing so, and was blown away with the 10-pound tweeter, with the way that a 10-pound tweeter can play after you change a 10, sorry, not pound, euro, my bad, I'm mixing up my European currencies. I was blown away with the way that a 10 euro tweeter can play after you change a 10 euro cent electrolytic cap for a 5 euro film cap. Basically saying that changing out the low quality junk components for higher quality, more expensive components, even on a cheap speaker, can make a big difference. And I 100% agree. That's the same experience I had when the first speaker that I upgraded the crossovers on was my R15Ms, my Klipsch R15Ms. And because I was not happy with the way that they sounded, I thought that they did not sound very alive. Even with the Klipsch, being the usually hotter top end, loud, shouty speakers, they just sounded so dead. They didn't bring life out in the music. Or even the little baby Klipsch R14Ms sound beautiful and fantastic for being such, cheaply made speakers. Well, when I put in some higher quality components into the R15Ms, they just came alive and they just completely woke up. And they sound wonderful now. And all the naysayers that think that audiophiles are full of crap, which, let's be honest, we are a little bit when it comes to some stuff. But if you think that a cheap capacitor and an expensive capacitor sound exactly the same, then that is good for you, because that means that you don't have to have expensive components and go through all the work of upgrading to have a good experience. So consider yourself lucky. But if you have learned how to hear the difference between different speakers and hear the difference between different qualities of different, song files based on how compressed they are, if you can start to hear a difference, you've just started down a very expensive road of chasing quality. And, it's fun. Being an audiophile, liking music, liking the sound of the music, not just the music itself. It's a fun hobby, just like electronics or cars or motorcycles. And that's kind of why I'm interested in all this stuff. That's why my videos are all over the board, is because there isn't any one thing that I'm interested in. I'm interested in all sorts of things. So, Peter Pixo there, I think, is another perfect example of how there are differences, real differences in this, because like him, I went in thinking this isn't going to make a bit of difference. I feel like I'm going to be wasting my money here. But, I was open-minded and I wanted to try it. And I was blown away at the difference that it made. If you don't know what to listen for, you probably won't hear much of a difference. But if you know what to listen for, it changes everything. So the next question number 11, is by Saeed H., who says, quick question, where did you buy the crash bars for your CB500 from? My bike is a 2019 model. Do you think the crash bars are going to work? Now, this is a good example of a specific question that I could potentially have a chance of answering. I got my crash bars for my CB500F on Amazon. They are Puig. I think that is how you pronounce the name now, Puig. Made in Spain. They are not the highest quality. The welding was, barely passable. Powder coating was pretty good, I think. But they are not designed to handle a high-impact crash and save the bike like magic. They aren't magic things. It's just a little... It's like a a screen protector or a case on your phone. It's never gonna help if you drop it from 50 feet. But, you know, if it's just an accidental, it falls onto the floor gently, or, you know, relatively gently, it should help to protect your phone. Same thing with this. It's just there to help against minor oopsies, not huge crashes. So maybe maybe they should be called oopsie bars instead of crash bars. If you're a businessman out there or a businesswoman, feel free to remarket them. I think there is, you know, an opportunity there. Do I think they're going to fit on the 2019 model? I would say probably. Honda does a really good job at making sure that all their stuff is cross-compatible from one place to another. Again, it's mainly for the ease of production and the cheapness of production. If everything is the same, if everything shares components, you can make everything for much cheaper. Just, you know, economies of scale. It's if you don't know what economies of scale is, it's it's an entry-level concept in economics, where the more of something you can make, the cheaper it will be, because the fixed costs are amortized across all the things you make. So, for example, plastic injection molding. There's a reason why plastic injection molded parts are so cheap. And that is because plastic is cheap, and you can sell 1 million parts or 1 billion parts very quickly and easily. Most people don't know that the cost of a mold for an injection molding machine, just the mold, can be anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. Just because some of those molds are so complicated and they require such tight tolerances that it takes master machinists, you know, possibly a year just to make one mold, depending on how complex it is. And that's what drives up the cost, is just all the man hours that go into making those things. So it makes sense. But if you can take, you know, $1 million and divide that by 100 million parts, it then becomes pretty cheap to, you know, make each part. And maybe, you know, those numbers don't go off of those numbers exactly. I'm just giving an example. And again, coming back to will it fit the 2019, and me thinking yes, well, there aren't many differences between the earlier models of CB500s and the later models. I missed a solder joint. You see, this is why it pays to pay attention. You get distracted and you miss things. Should be all of them now. And especially because those crash bars, they bolt onto engine and frame hard points, where the engine and the frame are bolted together. I don't think Honda would change those positions between models, especially they aren't going to do it for a facelift. So there really should be no reason why it wouldn't fit the 2019, except for if they changed the body paneling, or, you know, like the fairing parts. Those might be changed in such a way that the crash bars will interfere with the plastic. But that isn't really something I can make a good estimate on. That would just be a total guess. So the moral there is things will usually fit across models, because the changes they make are so small. But always check. It pays to ask. But at some point you just have to make the decision whether you want to try it or not. That is some really good cocoa. I cannot get over how good that is. You know, I really despise the oddly satisfying genre of videos on YouTube, just because they're so generic, and usually they aren't satisfying at all. But I really like cutting off these leads with scissors. It feels so, I don't know, there's something that feels nice about it. I know that's kind of weird, but yeah, it's true. Let me find something heavy to put over there. What is something heavy? This, my dial caliper box. There we go. So the next question, question number 11, is from Your Girl Patty. That is another great username. Well, my girl, Patty, says, if you don't mind me asking, how much did they charge you to ship these to the States? This is in reference to the microwave toasty maker. My answer is too much. way, way, way too much. I think I was able to get I bought 3 of them to get the shipping per unit down. And I think they were $38 a piece US per toasty. And I was charged like $35 each to ship them. So they were very expensive. And then I kept one for myself and I gifted one to my sister and one to one of my friends. And yeah, that was not a cheap thing to do. But you know what? It's a fun way to make some food. I don't use it as much as I wish I would. I don't know why, because it's so fun and easy to use. I guess I don't make the time to use it as much as I really should. But I might make a second video on it with a new recipe if I find something inspiring. Number 13, Mark asks, or says, you can also use small strips of sound dampening material like Dynamat on the woofers to help with ringing. Mark, you are absolutely correct. On my R14Ms and my R15Ms, I put some blue tack on the steel frame of the woofers to minimize how much the steel frame would ring or resonate. The reason why I used blue tack is because it is readily available anywhere. It is cheap and it is easy to apply. The downside is that it probably doesn't dampen out ringing as much as maybe a custom-made product for resonance dampening as like Dynamat. But Dynamat is much more expensive. It's harder to find. And, you know, most people may not have as easy of access to that. So that's why I used blue tack. But there are a million ways to do the same thing. You know, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, as the saying goes. You can do it however you want. Just because I do something a certain way, you do not have to do it the same way. Scott M says, I just bought 2 sets of R51Ms on sale for $145 a pair. That is a really good deal. He also says here, basically the same speaker as the R15M. I agree with you on the sound. Love the idea of upgrading the internals. I don't think I could do the crossover, though. It seems beyond my capabilities. Well, Scott, I would say nothing is beyond your capabilities if you have the drive to learn and if you, want to make the time to learn some of the skills. Like I said earlier, I make my videos to show that really anybody can do this stuff. If I can do it, you can do it. You have to take the time to learn and, try and remember what you've learned over time. And yeah, the R15Ms, they were kind of disappointing in the way they sounded. And by the sounds of Scott here, the R51s are the same way. And I would imagine that because they use mostly the same components. I think it was more of a visual design refresh, not so much I don't think the internals were changed too much, but I don't own a pair. I haven't looked inside of any of them, so I can't say that for sure. So, don't be afraid to try something new and try something a little risky like upgrading the crossover. If you can find the component values, you don't even have to open them up to try and build the new crossover. And building a new crossover is not too complicated. Soldering is very easy to learn. It's not a difficult skill. And, you know, drilling some holes in the right spots on a board to hold the circuitry, that's not too difficult. That's not beyond, you know, anyone's ability to drill some holes. You do not need a drill press. You can use a hand drill. And, you know, it doesn't, like, I use ABS plastic, 1/4 inch thick ABS, just because it's a material that I like to work with. It's very rigid, it's electrically insulative, and it's cheap. And again, it's a nice material to work with, and it's what I like to use. But you can use thin MDF, like 1/4 inch thick MDF. You could use a thin piece of plywood. You could use high-density polyethylene. Like, you could cut up your cutting board and use that if you wanted. You don't even really need a circuit board. You could just hot glue it inside the enclosure. Not that I recommend that. In fact, I would highly recommend against that. I think using some form of a circuit board would be optimal. But if you really want to get crazy, you could design and engineer your own printed circuit board and have that made, or make it yourself. So you can do things a bunch of different ways. So, I mean, $145 a pair for a couple R51Ms, that is a steal of a deal. Even if they are used, because speakers, I mean, so long as they haven't been thrashed, they'll last a very, very, very long time. That is the end of page 2. I'm getting through these questions very quickly. And we've been going for quite a while. The odds are that I'm going to run out of questions before I complete this supercomputer, in which case I will be cutting the video feed, finishing off camera, and then coming back to finish the main video. So, the next question, number 15. It's not Burger King foot lettuce. It is Tom Koutz, or Kutz, or something. Koutz. You tell me how that's pronounced. So, Tom says, "Hi, Casey. First-time viewer. Really enjoyed your Borea crossover upgrade video. Have watched many GR research videos and was impressed with you pulling back the curtain on the component values so one can purchase them on their own versus a kit. Thanks for taking the time to do that. I'll be watching some of your other non-speaker videos. Stay safe, Tom." Well, that is very kind of you, Tom. And I appreciate that compliment. That is a criticism that I have of many of the speaker reviewers and other audio channels on YouTube, is they never disassemble the speaker. I shouldn't say never. It's very not often that they disassemble the speaker, show how it's disassembled, show how it's constructed, what materials is it made out of, what are the component values in the crossover, what is the schematic of the crossover. And that's part of the reason why I do that, is because, like, no one else is doing that, and this is information that I feel like is, you know, worth sharing. So the speakers that I have access to, I will, you know, I'll happily share what's inside of them. And, you know, that's nothing against Danny over at GR Research. He does some awesome stuff, and I completely agree with him not sharing the component values of the kits that he provides, because he doesn't just sell the stock components of the same speaker typically. He actually re-engineers those he re-engineers the crossover from scratch and uses brand new values and with a brand new schematic layout to make the frequency response and the impedance a lot better than factory. So that to him, is intellectual property that he owns. So I don't think he should be giving that away. That would be bad business. But I don't think there's any reason why he shouldn't tell you what the factory values are. But, you know, that's the way he does it, and there's nothing wrong with the way that he does his videos. He's free to them however he wants. So, and like you said there, I do videos that are far beyond speakers. Most of my viewers and most of my subscribers are here for speaker videos. So I do, to some degree, try to keep them happy with a speaker video occasionally, but I do my videos based on what I'm interested in at the time and what's going on in my life at the time. And if that happens to not be speakers, well, then there won't be any speaker videos. I want to, you know, keep the audience happy at the same time. I don't want to do videos because people are asking or demanding a certain kind. So again, thank you very much, Tom. That was very kind. Number 16, Sam Fitterer. How rare is your BMW? I'm going to assume he means the Z4. And that Z4 is what I would consider to be quite rare. I am not sure if BMW has ever officially acknowledged or published their sales and production figures for that car. But at least according to a source on Wikipedia, the world's most reliable source of information, there were 2,108 BMW Z4 coupes sold and produced for North America. That includes the, I should say, that does not include the Z4M coupe. That is only the 3.0 SI coupe. And that 2,108, that is a very, very small number. I have never seen another Z4 coupe E86, either a Z4M or a Z4 3.0 SI, because they're just that rare. I've seen tons of convertible Z4s. I mean, the convertible Z4 is already a pretty uncommon car. It's just, it wasn't very popular for some reason. Even though it is a really fantastic, fun car. It just wasn't as popular as the Japanese or American offerings at the time. And I believe, if I remember correctly, only 828 of the 2,108 produced for North America were manual transmission. So if you're going to narrow it down to a specification, my car is one of only 828 produced for North America with a manual transmission. So that would make it even more rare to find one. And if you think about it, that's just the number they produced and or sold. How many do you think have been crashed and totaled and scrapped at this point? So it's possible that my car is one of only maybe 600 registered manual transmission 3.0 SI coupes in the country. That's pretty cool. I didn't buy the car because it was rare. I bought it because it was the one that fit my automotive desires at the time. I wanted something that was relatively lightweight, something that had 6 cylinders, not 8 and not 4. I wanted something that was manual transmission. I wanted something that was not a convertible. I wanted something that was known for relatively good reliability, although any research you do on BMWs, they will probably say to the contrary. Even though my experience with BMWs has been fantastic, I have had no major mechanical problems, just pretty much, you know, oil leaks and coolant leaks as they come up. And, you know, they're annoying, but they're easy to deal with and it's not that expensive. I think this thing's coming together pretty quickly. It feels a lot faster than the last one, maybe because I'm talking the entire time and not just sitting here. And I got some that are falling out. Yeah, I'll do it this way again. Let's have some more cocoa. I'm going to say it every time. That stuff is awesome. I love it. Next question from Jonathan Heron. Where do you buy your crossover parts from? That is another excellent question. Originally, I bought my crossover components from Parts Express because it is easy to get all your parts in one spot. They have a pretty good variety of like different pricing levels as far as, they have a good variety of different price points as well as different quality levels and a good variety of component values, so you can almost always find what you need. But I also found online a website called Sonic Craft, and they seem to be a much smaller outfit. I have not been in direct contact with them, and I haven't done a whole lot of research into their business, but they seem to be closer to a mom and pop shop as compared to Parts Express. And their services have been fantastic for me. I've gotten some, like my Mills resistors. I get almost all my Mills resistors from Sonic Craft. And then my, is it Mundorf? The white capacitors that I used in my Triangle Borea for the tweeter circuit, I got those from Sonic Craft as well. So they've been really good. No complaints there. Their shipping was fast. Their pricing is pretty reasonable. And they have, I would say, even more expensive and higher quality components than Parts Express does. Now, when it comes to, like, where do I get my port tubes and sound deadening foam, speaker terminals, those I still get from Parts Express because I haven't found another supplier that supplies those parts for a reasonable price compared to, or a better quality compared to Parts Express. And if I'm already ordering from Parts Express, you may as well, buy more stuff because they got that great marketing tactic of, excuse me. Oof. That's quite a sneeze. So anyway, you're already buying stuff from Parts Express. If you buy over like $50 in stuff, it's free, or free shipping. So, they really make you want to buy stuff from them. And they also have drivers. Here's what I really don't like about Parts Express, though, is they do not give what is it? Is it FRD files? Basically, the frequency response and the impedance files for doing driver simulations or crossover simulations. They only have it for the Dayton Audio branded stuff, which makes sense because Dayton Audio is their in-house brand, if I understand that correctly. And that is a way for them to boost business for themselves, but I also feel like it's just other brands don't release their FRD files. Why? I have no idea. There are tools you can buy to measure those, and I don't think they're too expensive. I just haven't bothered buying any because I don't have the accompanying calibrated microphones and other software required to measure speakers. And while I do love speakers and I love upgrading them, I'm not so into the speaker hobby that I want to invest a lot of money and time into making custom speakers. Here we go. More resistors. By the way, the reason why I'm doing all the resistors first is because they're shorter components. The LEDs are taller, so they will be, you should, at least from my understanding, when you're building up your circuit board, go from shortest component to tallest component. It makes it easier to put things on. I'd say that's probably just a good general rule of thumb, and it's not a law that you have to follow. All right, question number 18. Buxy Bogdan says, so you didn't mention anything about the hose that goes to the oil pan. What did you do with it? And does it really need a Volkswagen PCV piece. This question is, all right, so coming aside from that, you notice I flipped the circuit board around to work the other way now. That means that the colors also have to go the other way. So yellow now goes to my right instead of my left. And if I didn't notice that, I would have put a whole bunch of them in the wrong way around if I want to keep the color consistent. Anyway, going back to Buxy's question, this has to do with one of the videos I made on the magnesium valve cover conversion on the Z4. This also relates to a prior question about the differences between the first and second version of the N52. Because the later version of the N52 had an integrated PCV valve, or CCV valve in BMW's case, it was integrated into the valve cover, it no longer needed a drain hose to take the oil that was separated from the air to, put it back in the pan. It just has a hole that goes back down into the valve train or at the top of the head, and that's how the oil that was separated from the air gets back into the engine. So there is no hose to do anything with, because there's no hole in the oil pan to, have anything drained to. And I do believe there is a plug in the oil pan, so you could unplug that and then have a drain go back to the oil pan, but to me that defeats the purpose of the catch can setup that I was trying to go for, which is to take everything out of the oil that shouldn't be there. But if you want to, divert everything back to the oil pan again, just like it was stock, that is possible, especially if you have the first version of the N52, which I would assume that Buxy Bagden has on his car, which is why he asked the question. Yeah, that the magnesium valve cover conversion, that was a fun series to make, and it was a fun project to do, because everywhere that I saw online, it said it either doesn't work, or you shouldn't do it, it's not going to work, it's not possible. And I will agree, with stock components, it isn't really possible to do, just because there's too many dissimilar parts. But I was able to do mine without damaging any stock parts. So my engine is completely reversible back to the way it was stock, and that was the primary goal of that project, is to not destroy the engine to a way that it couldn't go back to the way it was originally. The next question, question number 19. Yes, and I am getting through these questions very quickly. I should either slow down on questions or finish all the resistors and then pick up the questions when I'm done. Maybe I'll do that. We'll see. We'll see. So question number 19 is from Damian Whitfield, who says, "Great job. I'm glad it turned out well for you. I was thinking about getting handlebar risers for my CB500F, as I have fairly short arms and feel like I'm riding a sports bike. Only problem is I got my bike a couple days ago and I would be scared to tamper around on a brand new bike. Definitely would be good to have, though." That is a good point, and I can actually relate to that now, because I recently picked up a brand new Honda CRF 250L, which I was very nervous to touch any. Did I miss one? I'm short a resistor. I must have miscounted. That's fine though. I will pull out a new one. There we go. guess my only complaint about this new Kester solder so far is that it's a little runnier than the previous solder that I had been using. There's a lot more flux in it, which I guess is a good thing, but is different from what I'm used to, so I'll have to kind of, readjust the way I solder ever so slightly to account for that. Getting back to the question, those handlebar risers completely changed the feel of my CB500, and I would not want to go without them. I can actually sit up properly, and it makes the bike comfortable to ride pretty much indefinitely, where before, without the handlebar risers, I was leaned forward too much and riding for more than, 15 minutes, and my back would start to hurt. And I have a pretty short body and really long arms and legs, so you'd think that wouldn't be such a big deal, but it was enough pressure on my wrists and enough pressure on my back that it just was not comfortable, and it made it harder to ride, especially as a beginner. And once I put those bar risers on, I was a lot more comfortable, and I felt a lot more confident on the bike as well, so it helped in a lot of different ways. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut the video and restart, and that way it will decrease some of the file sizes. That was a 37-minute clip. This is going to be a long video if you couldn't tell by the number at the bottom. I do not expect this video to get many views at all, or if it does, it's going to be a very short average view duration. Not that my videos have a particularly great view duration anyway, because my videos tend to be very dry, technical, and not I don't have a flamboyant personality like all the vloggers do, who get millions of views for basically saying buy my merch and all that sort of crap. No offense, but I cannot stand vlogging. It is complete cringe to me. But vloggers are, I support their right to vlog, and I support everyone's right to watch them and enjoy them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the great part about the country we live in, is freedom of expression. Which means I am free to express myself in a very drab and boring fashion. Yeah. I've gotten a couple of comments in real life about me not being super expressive with my voice. That said, I have gotten compliments when I've done some public speaking about how expressive I was, so it goes both ways, I guess. Tell you what, I will do one more question, and then I'm going to finish the resistors off camera, and then I will start back up with questions again once I start the LEDs. The LEDs are a lot more tricky than the resistors, I will tell you. So the last question for the resistors segment is from GSR Chris U, who says, any comments on the upgrade? Was it worth the $100 USD in parts? Just picked up a pair of these stock and haven't had a chance to listen to them. This is in reference to my 3-part mini-series on upgrading the Paradigm Mini Monitor V5s. They are actually my main speaker at my desk for work, and they are fantastic. They are a lot better than they were stock, and I would absolutely spend the $100 over and over and over again to upgrade those speakers. They already sounded really good, but they lacked clarity, they lacked transparency, and once I upgraded the crossover, they just sounded so much more crisp, and the detail, especially in like jazz music and acoustic music, it feels like in some well-recorded songs with guitar, an acoustic guitar specifically, it feels like that acoustic guitar is right in your face. And I never thought I would say that. I never thought I would believe that, but it really does. It is very, very good. So definitely worth the money. Again, once you learn some of the skills and once you're comfortable working on speakers in a technical way, it's not that hard to do. It's a little bit of money, yeah, but it really just it feels so worth it to me. I'm not gonna necessarily upgrade every speaker that I have. Some of them really aren't worth it. Like, for example, the Klipsch R14M. I don't think I'm ever going to upgrade the crossover in that, simply because one, there isn't really room in that small box, but two, it already sounds so good. I think the minimal upgrades that I've done to them are good enough for what that speaker is. It would definitely sound better with an upgraded crossover, but I don't think those ones are quite worth it, at least not to me. And yeah, fitting a crossover in there would be difficult. I think if I was going to do it, the way that I would do it is have 2 separate circuit boards per speaker. One board for the tweeter circuit, and one board for the woofer circuit, and then place them on opposite walls. So let's say that this is the floor of the enclosure. The drivers are up here, the terminals are at the back. Put one on this wall standing up and one on that wall standing up, and then have one wire going down to the woofer, then the other one goes up to the tweeter. You get what I'm saying. But it would be so cramped in there, it would be such a mess, and I think you would actually disrupt the port tuning, because you would be changing the volume inside that enclosure so significantly with how much more volume is taken up with the film capacitors and the inductors, that you might throw off the port tuning, which would again affect its sound quality and its output in terms of frequency response in the low end. So that's why I don't quite think it'd be worth it. You could wire up the speakers to a 2-way terminal cup directly and then have the crossover be external. You could do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And then you could possibly even make a more decorative base or a more decorative circuit board for your new crossover and have it as a way to show off. Maybe you could place it on top of the speaker. I don't know. You can get creative with it. And so you'd have your speaker wires from your amp going to the crossover, then from the crossover into the terminal cup, and again, have it all be external. I think that would be pretty cool, but I'm not going to do that one. I'll leave that one up to you guys. If one of you does it, definitely send me a link to the video. I would love to watch it. All right, so that'll do it for questions for this part. I will now cut, and when I come back, you should see the resistors done, and we will start up the LEDs. And we'll finish off these questions. So I will see you then. Welcome back. I'm sure you had a long wait there in between me cutting and then reopening a clip. What was it, like 1/10 of a second? For some people, their attention span is shorter than 1/10 of a second. Or maybe that's a little bit mean, but seems like so many people these days are only interested in instant gratification, and that just really is not going to lead you to having a very happy life if you can't have the patience to wait for something or earn something. I think this project here specifically shows that if you're only interested in instant gratification, you are not going to like this project very much, because it takes a lot of time. Oh, come on. It takes a lot of time, and this is not glamorous work, really. This is just, you're putting some parts on a circuit board and soldering them together. But it is so relaxing and enjoyable and therapeutic that it's something I really enjoy. And that's, I'm glad I have 5 of these. I'm glad JLC PCB has a minimum of 5. because it means that I get to make several of these and spend a few hours. I don't know if I'm going to do the rest of them all in one sitting, like the last one and this one. But, you know, it takes up a good chunk of a day. And that's definitely a good thing to use the time you have on this planet for productivity and creativity, and don't just sit in front of a screen, whether that be video games or some form of TV. It's not going to serve you well in the long term. Not that there's anything wrong with video games or TV. I mean, they have their place. I certainly do my fair share of consuming YouTube, probably too much actually. But I offset that by other things I do in my life, and a little bit offset by the things I create for YouTube as well. Now, Big Clive, if you remember watching many of his videos, he has a really cool jig that can be custom fit to just about any PCB size within reason. This is probably about as big as his jig could hold. And it has a piece of foam, and then it clamps it together, you flip it over, and then you can solder it. I don't have one of those, but what I do have is a piece of open cell urethane foam so that I can kind of emulate what he has there. So I can, depends on what side of the board I want to work on first, but I can squish the PCB against the foam, and then here we are, and I'm going to just double check that all of the leads on these LEDs are in the correct orientation, because I'd hate to have one in reverse polarity and then go poof. Yep, they all look correct to me. So what I do is I just kind of jiggle them around until they look centered. Something was jiggling there. And then we can just solder them on. The first few rows are easier because there's more pressure on the LEDs. The further along you go, the more the weight is distributed and the more picky they get. I also think that these LEDs are a lot harder to solder to than the resistors. I don't know if it's just because there's more junk on here, or if it's that the material they're made out of is a little trickier. I know you don't want to linger too long when soldering the LEDs especially. They're a little more heat sensitive. I also, if I remember correctly, it's best practice not to have the LEDs pushed right up against the circuit board, which is exactly what I'm doing, so I'm going against best practice. But again, this is just a toy. This isn't anything for like a space program. Here, let me show you something that annoys me a little bit when soldering these. Let's see. That one, the last one right there, the leg on the left, you see how it isn't, that solder joint isn't filled out completely? Or is it that second one? Yeah, that one there. The one that's in the center of the screen on the left-hand side, the left-hand leg, the positive. I'm not sure why that happens. I'm feeding in plenty of... Oh, and now I'm making a mess. Look at that. Not paying attention. You see, this is why we can't have nice things, because I will inevitably drop them. No big deal. Anyway, so yeah, these, they don't like to fill out completely with solder, and I'm not really sure why. I'm feeding a lot in, and I can feed more and more and more in, and it just doesn't seem to fill out. So it could, again, be something to do with these LEDs specifically. It could be that that's just the way they are. I don't see a reason why they should be that way. Like, you know, this one right here, I'll add more, and it still is like it's underfilled. Okay, well, maybe it requires a lot more than I'm giving it. Yeah, maybe that's it. I just need to give it a lot more solder instead of a little bit more. So getting back to the Q&A here, we're going to go to question number, I believe it's 21. Yes, question number 21. With my favorite username of all time, Slappy the Monkey. Slappy the Monkey says, really good vid. Thanks for the research. The research, planning to tinker mine also. I was wondering two things. What brand/model amp are you using? How long did you leave them, the R15Ms, burn in? Thanks again for the video. Really enjoyed it. All right, so what amps do I use? I have 3 amplifiers, one of which is an AV receiver. So my first amp that I got was the Yamaha R201S, I believe. Or maybe it's the S201R. It's an entry-level, inexpensive, $100 or so amp. 2-channel, left to right, and has 2, like an A and B for each channel. So you could theoretically have 4 speakers hooked up at a time. It's a pretty clean amp for what it is and for its cost. It's pretty heavy, really, reasonably well made. The remote works really well. It's just a nice amp for an entry-level $100 price point. Nothing to write home about, but also nothing to complain about. Yeah, those all look good enough. And if you look down the row, you can see all the LEDs look pretty good. So now I get to cut them off. And this is where having a nice cutoff tool, I left it zoomed in the entire time. Sorry about that. Anyway, this is where having a nice cutoff tool really helps, because I believe these are steel. They're like nickel-plated steel. And they're a lot tougher than the resistors, so having a high-quality snips makes these a breeze to get through. Again, no fatigue on your hands. It's like I'm cutting through paper with sharp scissors. It's really nice. So back to Slappy the Monkey's question. Man, I love that username. The second amp that I got was my AV receiver, which is a Sony something. It's the sound quality out of it is not great. It's not awful, but it is not quite as good as that Yamaha dedicated amplifier. It is a 7-channel? It'll do center, left, right, and surround. Maybe it's 5.2. Yeah, I think it's a 5.2 amp, or sorry, 5.2 AV receiver. It has 2 HDMI outputs, a whole bunch of HDMI inputs, a bunch of AV inputs, RCA inputs. It's the reason why I got it mainly is because it was on sale. So it was inexpensive. And this, keep in mind, I got these 2 amps when I was let's just say a baby in the audiophile world. I didn't really know much about quality. I just knew that I wanted something that had decent features to expand as I needed. And as an AV receiver, I actually really like it. It's programmable in terms of the inputs. You can rename inputs. You can set it up to have a phantom center channel. You can configure each of the channels for time delay and for cutoff frequency. And it has 2 subwoofer outputs. Now you cannot do stereo subwoofer outputs. It's just mono. So whatever the lowest frequencies are, it can send to the subwoofer, but it does not discriminate between a left and right channel for the subwoofer. It's just subwoofer, which is a little disappointing, but some of those frequencies are so low it doesn't really matter if they're stereo or not. They're omnidirectional anyway, but it'd be nice to have the feature to have them be stereo. And you know, as far as having movies and hooking up my computer to it, it's been really, really good, especially for the price. Just the sound quality isn't quite up there. And then the last, the third and currently final amp that I have is a Topping PA3, which is about a $100 amplifier. It's a Class D. It's very small, but man, that thing is clean. I think in terms of how like clean the sound is, it's definitely the best of my 3 amps, even though it's not necessarily the most powerful. And it doesn't have quite as warm of a sound as the Yamaha, but it is my favorite of all my amps by far. And it doesn't have a remote either, which is a little bit of a shame because it means you do have to get up if you're sitting down or laying down or something and you're listening. You do have to get up to change the volume, and it has 2-channel input, so it has like an input 1, input 2, but it only has 1 output per channel, so you couldn't hook up more than 1 pair of speakers to it, and that's all right for what it is. But it is very, very clean. I'd recommend really all the things that I've bought for the amps, if you understand that they may not be the top name in quality, but they're good for the price. They're good entry-level things. And then to finish up the second part of his question, how long did I let the R15s burn in? Well, I didn't. I don't really see a whole lot of value in letting something burn in. Just like, turn it on really loud and let it sit for X number of hours. Because those are hours that I could be listening to it rather than, rather than letting it, waste energy doing its own thing. So what I do is I just go in with the attitude that the sound is going to change very slightly over the first few hours of listening. And that has to do more with mechanical break-in of a new driver or a new speaker, more so than an electronic break-in primarily of the capacitors. But the electronics do break in a little bit. But again, you have to have a really, really highly tuned ear to notice the difference. And I'll be honest, I don't hear a difference between when the crossover components are brand new to when they've been played for a number of hours. The difference is so small, I don't think it's worth considering myself about. If you hear a difference, then break them in if you want. I just don't see any value. So another problem I encountered last time when doing these LEDs is that they had a habit of soldering themselves together across the positive and the negative and getting a dead short. So I had to spend a few minutes troubleshooting and making sure that there weren't any shorts between the 2 legs of the LED. It was a little annoying because I thought I had a couple dead LEDs, but it ended up just being, a couple shorted out connections. Again, that was a question from Slappy the Monkey, which is an awesome name. And so now we're on the last page of questions, and then I'll either have to cut again or just start BSing for a while. The next question number 22, is from Bailey Jones. Bailey Jones asks, do I still need crash bars if I never plan on crashing my motorcycle because I'm a good driver? I love the attitude there. That's pretty funny. I guess you don't really ever need crash bars, but like I said, they're good to have just in case. But if you're such a perfect driver that you never crash, well, I guess do you even need a helmet? I would say always wear a helmet. On the helmet topic for a second, actually, while I personally think you are an absolute idiot and a moron if you do not wear a helmet, I still think I am fully supportive of someone's decision not to wear one. And here's why. If you do not wear a helmet as a motorcyclist, you're not endangering anybody. In other words, your decision to either wear or not wear one does not affect the safety of people around you. Wear seatbelts, on the other hand, I don't think that should be a choice. You should have to wear your seatbelt, because if you aren't buckled in, you become a projectile within your car, and you can hurt other people or kill other people within your own vehicle if you're not buckled in and you start flying around the car when your car starts rolling. And that is why I strongly believe that seatbelts should be mandatory. But name me a scenario in which you are not wearing a helmet and you are now endangering the people around you more because you're not wearing one. I can't think of a situation like that, because, like, let's say you hit your head against someone else's head. A helmet and your skull are, not so dissimilar in toughness or hardness that your skull is going to hurt somebody more than your helmet would hurt somebody if you ran into someone. Or if you collided heads with somebody. I don't see how wearing a helmet affects other people around you. So because the only one you're endangering is yourself, I think you should have the choice, and you should have the right to choose whether you want to wear one or not. Though I will say, having people with their permit, or people that are under the age of 18, having it mandatory that they wear a helmet, I think that's pretty reasonable as well. Because if you're not 18, you're not legally an adult, you're still legally a kid or a juvenile or whatever the technical term is. So, and it's important to protect people, but you should still give people the freedom to make their own decisions and to take their own risks. Next is from Evil Homer 15. This is question number 23. Evil Homer 15 asks, or says, there's a sizable community within the audiophile segment on YouTube, and people who deconstruct/upgrade speakers are few and far between. Most people just get a product and talk about it. That's why yours is different and gets you some traction. It's refreshing. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the video, and again, Evil Homer 15, thank you very much for the kind comment. There are a lot of people out there who just, I think a lot of it has to do with just the business side. That a lot of reviewers get the product on loan from the company, they only have it to review it, then they have to send it back. And of course, they're not going to want you to take it apart. Or maybe they're doing it a little bit more of a, in my opinion, kind of a scummy way, where they'll buy the speaker, they'll use it, and then they'll return it, with, falling under the returns policy of, if you're not entirely satisfied, you can return it for free. I don't think that's right, to buy something and then return it without the genuine intention of needing it in the first place. If you're buying it to use it and then you return it once you're done, to me that's kind of like stealing. Your opinion may differ, but that's kind of how I see it. And if you take it apart, then you would lose that ability to return it, because you've now tampered with the device. I also think just a lot of people aren't interested in that, and they aren't interested in the technical side. They just are worried more about, how does it sound, how does it look, how does it make you feel? And those are perfectly valid positions to have. If you're not interested in the technical side, that's fine. But for those that are, it seems like there is a void in the video or the content market for the more technical side, where you take things apart. There are a lot of YouTubers out there that are purely technical and don't really, you know, bridge the gap between what's technical and what's just marketing or what's, you know, just the product review. And I kind of agree with Evil Homer 15 there in that I think my videos bridge that gap, even though they aren't the, you know, the highest of quality. What is going on here? Interesting how, yeah, these LEDs, maybe it's the fact that these are really low quality LEDs and that's why they aren't wanting to take solder too well. That could very well be. These were very, very cheap, and they also took a very long time to get here. I ordered these LEDs in early December, and they did not get here until the kind of beginning to middle of February. Yeah, I actually thought they weren't ever going to show up, but then all of a sudden they showed up one day. So the other set, or the other supercomputer, the red flashing one, which was a gift, was supposed to be a Christmas gift, but that ended up being a little behind, almost closer to a Valentine's Day gift, honestly. Not that the person I was giving it to was a Valentine, but, you know, in terms of timing, that's kind of how it ended up. The next question, question number 24, is from Cass31, who says, "Nice video, very detailed teardown and explanation. I never expected Klipsch to have these cheap crossovers." Yeah, I didn't expect that either when I first got into speakers. I really didn't even know what a crossover was, other than it's just this magical device, this magical box inside the computer, or sorry, inside the speaker, that just does magical things to make the sound come out in the right way. And then once I took them apart and I realized what they were and how they worked, and then I opened up my Klipsch speakers, I thought, geez, that's it? That's all that makes the sound separate, you know, low and high frequencies between the two drivers? Wow. And then I learned more and learned about what, you know, the higher quality components looked like and how they worked. And I thought, geez, they really don't put much money into these speakers. And of course they don't, because, well, they can't afford it. If they were to put proper quality crossover components, if they were to use, you know, full on 3/4 inch thick MDF, and they were to use real wood veneer, and they would use the highest quality of drivers with plastic injection molded frames and the highest quality woofer material and silver this, gold that, top line, everything, the speakers would cost, you know, $30,000 by the time it got to you. It just would not be economical in any way. So that's why they're so cheap. Is for you to be able to pay a reasonable price for them. Did I put those ones in the right way? Yes, I did. Sometimes I question myself. Sorry, another quick pause there. It turns out that my phone that I film on was not charging quite correctly, or maybe it was just drawing more than it was receiving from the power supply, so I went and got the, well, a slightly more powerful power supply. And I also took the battery case off my phone, so hopefully all the power goes directly into the phone and can not be drained. It's a good thing I looked at the screen to see that it said, "Warning, 10% battery." Where was I? Oh yes, cheap crossover parts. So, I think I was done on that topic. Is there anything more to say? Well, I guess when you think about the manufacturing and the cost of manufacturing, employee salaries, the cost to keep the lights on in the factory. If you think about the costs of shipping and distribution, the costs of marketing, which for Klipsch is very high. They do a lot of marketing. And you weigh all that in, they really have to pretty much quadruple their money on everything they do in terms of the parts. So if you buy a Klipsch R41M for $200, that probably costs them out the door at most $50, including the box and the foam to ship it in and the plastic and all that. They get $50. And I tell you, you try to make one of those for $50, and I don't think you would. So that's why they put cheap components. The other thing is that the average person doesn't care and can't really tell the difference between a cheap crap crossover and a high quality one. Like, maybe if you told them what to listen for, they could do it, but they wouldn't notice it. And having great sound quality doesn't sell speakers. Having okay sound quality and then really good marketing is what sells speakers. So they're going to put their money where they can make it, and that is marketing primarily. Sad, yeah, but you know what that does? The good thing about it is it gives people like you and me the opportunity to upgrade them and make a hobby out of it. We can make a hobby out of fixing their mistakes, for lack of a better term. And it's not so much like they're making mistakes, but we can fix the things that they were not able to afford. So the last question I have here from viewers, and I could have put in more, I thought this was going to be enough material to go through, but turns out that it is not, is from Abigail Schmidt. I like your last name. Abigail Schmidt says, "What made you want to get a bike?" By that I'm assuming she means a motorcycle, and that is another great question. Well, back in high school, I had a kind of a high school graduation gift from a family friend. It was a 1974 Kawasaki H1 Mach 3 500. It was a 2-stroke, 3-cylinder, 500cc motorcycle, which had one of the fastest 0 to 60 times in its day, and it was a barn find. It literally was a barn find because the family friend of mine, he bought it at an auction back in, the 90s to early 2000s. And it just kind of sat in his barn. He never did anything with it. He bought it and, never used it. And I noticed it was in there one day, and I said, "Hey, if you ever don't want that, I'd be happy to buy it from you." Well, it turns out he actually decided to give it to me as a graduation gift for high school. Keep in mind, this bike did not run, and it needed some work. It had good compression, but, it wasn't rusted all the crap, but it had no spark. It had rotten gas in the fuel tank, and it just really needed some TLC. But the problem is, back in high school and early college when I had the bike, I didn't know as much about engines and mechanical stuff as I do now. So I really wasn't able to do anything with it. And if I knew then what I currently know, I would have been able to get that bike up and running within probably a week. But I eventually traded that for a welder. I kind of regret it, but I ended up getting more use out of the welder for a while than the bike, so it kind of made sense. This was what I'm talking about with getting solder kind of trapped between the two legs. There, that should fix it. So anyway, I never got the bike running, and you know, back then I didn't have as much money to put into the bike. And if I had all the money in the world, I could have just, you know, bought the parts to, you know, get it up and running again. And I wouldn't have to compensate with a lack of money with the presence of skill. And yeah, it also needed a new chain. The brakes, that's another thing. The brakes needed some work. And I knew very little about braking systems back then, which are really simple, but if you don't know, you don't know. That is a classic bike. It was kind of the sport bike or the crotch rocket of its day. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't start out on that bike, because I probably would have killed myself, or at least gotten severely injured, because I heard that bike was rough handling. Being a two-stroke, the power was either on or off. It really didn't have a whole lot of throttle modulation. Of course, these are just things I hear. Obviously, I never got to ride the bike. And then my interest for bikes went dormant for a while, even though I always kind of wanted to. I kind of my brain went more towards liking cars, and that's when I got the Z4 and got more into cars. And for a while I was like, oh, I would never ride a bike. That's just a death wish. And then I found some good biking content on YouTube that made me rethink my opinion. And I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe I do want to try learning how to use a motorcycle. So during 2020, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get my motorcycle license. And from the time I made that decision to the time I had the license in my hand with my brand new, it was new to me, CB500F, which only had, again, 1100,000, that doesn't make any sense, 1,100 miles on it. It is almost brand new. So from the time I made the decision to start, or to get my license, was like barely 3 weeks. I signed up for the earliest class I could get for MSF to get my license. I had my permit within a week, and then my bike I had within 2 weeks, and then my MSF course was completed within 3 weeks of me making the decision that I wanted a bike. So it's astounding what you can accomplish when you really put your mind to something, and when, you know, the stars kind of have to align to some degree. Some things you just can't do in a timely manner, but that I was able to get done very, very quickly. I got myself a helmet, got myself a half-decent riding jacket. I don't have riding pants yet. I want to get those soon, especially with the coming season and wanting to do some dual sport riding, some off-road stuff. I do want some more appropriate pants. Let's see. Yeah, everything is still in the proper polarity, which is good. And the second I got my bike and I rode for the first time I rode my bike, my CB500, I rode from my place to my grandparents' place, which was about a 20 or 25 minute drive normally, but it took me 35 minutes because I've used a dirt bike before off-road, but I only went maybe, you know, 20 to 25 miles an hour on some trails. I shouldn't say it wasn't a road. It was dirt trails on the property of some family friends of mine. And I had a total of maybe 3 hours on the bike, and that was a few years before I got my license. So my motorcycle skill was pretty much nothing, or my motorcycle experience was pretty much nothing. And especially nothing above about 20 or 25 miles an hour. And I'll tell you, the first time you get on a motorcycle and you go 55, it feels like you're going a million miles an hour. It is actually quite frightening. It's thrilling and exhilarating, but also quite frightening. And, you know, I eventually got over that after the first couple of rides. But because of some of the videos I watched and how seriously I take safety and training, I always made sure to pay more attention to what's going on the road than, you know, having the fun. So it probably took me the first 300 to 500 miles to actually start having more fun than work. And don't get me wrong, it was enjoyable and it was a blast the entire time. But, you know, the amount of effort spent on let's see, I think I might have a couple of these backwards now. Or maybe it's just this one that's miscut. Or maybe it's just me looking at it wrong. So anyway, the amount of energy spent on making sure I was safe and watching out for other vehicles and paying attention to shifting gears correctly and applying the throttle correctly, that far outweighed the amount of fun that I had, only because I took it so seriously. And then once I got, you know, the hang of it and I didn't have to think about it so much, then the amount of fun that I had far, far exceeded the amount of work required. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that when you find something that you truly enjoy doing, it's a kind of a life-changing thing. And motorcycling is probably the first thing I've done in a very long time, if ever, where I felt an instant connection to the hobby. And I was like, why didn't I do this sooner? I wish I would have been motorcycling since I was 16. That's how well I took to riding a motorcycle. And I'm not great by any means. I'm not a great rider, but I think considering the limited experience, I do pretty well for myself with the, you know, if you think of it in a proportion of experience to skill, I think I've done pretty well. I might like to try to look into doing some track days just to get more road bike skill. And I also might consider trying to find some people to do some true like enduro or like some true off-road riding with, to get more skill there, to help out with, you know, doing dual sport, or maybe trials. Maybe that would be more helpful at first, but now that I have my CRF, I'm able to do on-road stuff and off-road stuff. And the CB500F is not the best road bike in terms of performance, in the same way that the CRF 250L is by far and away not the best off-road bike for performance. But what Honda did with those bikes is make a bike that is accessible to beginners and something that is also a bike that really skilled people can still get a lot of performance out of if you know how to use it. So there's a lot of growing potential with the bike. It's easy to use for a beginner, and you can get a lot of performance as an expert rider. And they're also very, very reliable. And that's why I went with Honda. I'm not the biggest fan of Honda cars. Not because they're not good, just because I think they lack a little bit of heart and soul. They're too good. They're too boring to me. Where the Honda motorcycles, I think, are really the place to go if you just want a bike that works and isn't going to give you trouble. So that, I think that answers that question pretty well. And I'm officially out of viewer questions, and I only have 2 more here that I wrote myself. I'll do the last one here first, which is, why don't you stick to one topic of videos? In the first question, question number 00, when I asked why am I on YouTube, I kind of answered this question already, but I don't think I really hit on the main point, which is I don't want to get stuck doing one type of video because I don't consider myself to be a YouTuber. I just post videos to YouTube. And that's why, although the speaker videos are the ones that have kind of taken off the most on my channel, and that I would assume that most of my subscribers have subscribed for the speaker videos, and I can also see that from the analytics, that they are by far and away the most popular videos on my channel in terms of subscribers and watch time and views. I just don't want to get stuck doing one kind of video because that's what the viewers want. And that because it just seems so boring to me to do the same thing over and over and over again. I want to always be doing something new, always be doing something where I'm learning, because I am by nature a generalist. I'm not a specialist. I don't want to specialize in doing only one thing. And that's why I will never have as much recognition or as much popularity as a lot of other channels that do specialize, because if you as the viewer, you can be the generalist in terms of what you view. And you can do that by watching specialists. So why would you as a viewer want to watch a generalist if a generalist is not going to be as good at a given thing as a specialist? And so that's why my videos, I don't think, are ever going to have as much appeal to a mass audience as other channels. And another reason that my channel probably will never really take off is because when people subscribe to a channel, they subscribe because they want one thing. You know, they want to know that what they're subscribing for is what they're going to get every time. Otherwise, what's the whole point of subscribing, right? And I agree with that too. Why would I want to subscribe to a channel that I never know what I'm going to get? Otherwise, you know, I would just let the YouTube algorithm take care of sending me videos, and I wouldn't bother subscribing. So I think that is definitely something that works to my disadvantage. But my choice to not get, you know, shoved into one corner and be, I guess, for lack of a better term, typecast as the speaker guy or the motorcycle guy or the car guy or the you really suck at electronics guy, which I know I'm not very good at electronics, but I try. That's just, I don't know. I don't like having to do just one thing. It gets boring. I like moving around, and part of that I think comes from both a combination of, you know, the public school system, and I guess it'd be the same whether you're in public or private school, but, you know, in school, when you're growing up from kindergarten to being a senior in 12th grade, you spend 13 years of your life constantly changing what you're learning and constantly changing the topic that's on your mind. You spend 13 years always having to push and push and push to learn more and more and more. And you can resist that push, but the people that resist the push tend to not get good grades, and not that they aren't smart, they just don't get the good grades. They don't excel as well academically because they're just not interested in the topics. And, you know, when you look at it from the larger scale of things, you realize, wow, that really doesn't matter that you didn't get good grades necessarily because, well, you just weren't interested in the things they were trying to teach, or you weren't interested in learning a bunch of different things. You just wanted to live your life. And then some kids were just not interested in doing school or learning, and they just kind of wanted to be lazy. And, you know, there's a portion of the population that is like that. They just don't care to conform with society. They just want to be kind of lazy and do their own thing. And that sort of attitude, I don't really condone that. So, especially in college, where every 3 months of my life, or sorry, every 4 months of my life in college, I had to do something completely different, where I had fall semester and I had certain types of classes, and then I'd have a short break, and then spring semester I'd have completely different classes, a completely different schedule, a completely different group of people that I had to work with. Man, these LEDs just do not want to accept solder very well. I don't get it. Maybe cleaning them would be better. It is possibly that, I know this is supposed to be higher quality solder, but I expected it to work better than this. It's just really not wanting to take. Very frustrating. Anyway. And so then after spring semester, then I'd have, a summer job where it's something completely different that I'm doing. And then I go back and, push in fall semester, and then a quick break. And then I go back spring semester. And with my life changing so much I was in college for 4.5 years. So 17.5 years of my life was spent never doing the same thing for any longer than a period of a few months. And I think because I got so good at using, I adapted so well to that way of living, that now that I'm in a post-college world where I have a job where I'm just doing the same thing every day, that's almost every job, I just haven't adapted as well to that. And my outlet for that is YouTube videos. And so why would I want to, suffer the same monotony in my YouTube videos as I do in real life? So this is sort of like a college course in a way for me, only it's the reverse. Instead of learning every day, I'm kind of teaching, but you'd be surprised. The best way to learn is to teach. Because if you can teach something, that shows that you must understand it well enough to be able to teach it. So I learn probably more in every video that I make than I do, I do more of the learning than you do in every video that I make. Only because I'm the one that's, I'm the one in the teacher role, per se. That is maybe an unconventional way to view things, but that's how I see it. And I'll be honest, I really don't miss college all that much. I miss getting to change up my life every 4 months and have something new to learn, have something new to experience every 4 months. That I do miss, but everything else, yeah, nah. College is a lot of work. It's very expensive. It takes a lot of time. You have to be very disciplined to do college well. It is not for the faint of heart, and honestly, I really don't think college is for everybody. I think there are a lot of people out there that go to college that don't know why they're doing it. They just didn't know any different, and their teachers and their parents all said, you have to go to college or you're going to be a failure. Well, I don't think that's true. I think the real the real mark of failure is when you're doing something that isn't what you think is best for yourself, and you're just letting other people you're letting other people sit behind the driver's seat of your life. And some people like doing that. Some people like not having to be the driver of their own life. And what a sad existence that must be. Because you're only here once. Why would you want someone else to have control over what you do? Why do you want someone else to dictate what you're allowed to, or who you're allowed to be? But keep in mind, if you are the one in the driver's seat, the responsibility and the accountability is on you to make sure you're doing the right thing. You know, are you acting in a moral way? Are you making the right decisions for yourself and the people around you? Maybe you are have, you know, guardianhood over someone or something, and so now the responsibilities in your life go beyond just you. Are you making the right choices for, you know, that which you have guardianhood over? That's a good question. And that's something that I think people need to be self-reflective about, but often people don't self-reflect. So the last question I have here, which maybe I won't answer because I kind of already answered it, is why did I do the magnesium valve cover conversion on my Z4? You know, I did already answer that. It's longevity, so I don't need to go into that again. And I'm officially out of questions. If this was a live stream or something, I could be reading chat for questions. But I don't know. Do you need like 1,000 subs? Like, do you need to be monetizable to have a live stream? I don't remember. And I don't even know how well I would be able to conduct a live stream. It'd be an interesting experience, that's for sure. If you've listened this far into the video, which I would be very surprised if anyone is, leave a comment on whether or not you think you'd like me to try a live stream sometime. And if so, on what topic or in what way. Again, that's assuming that I'm even eligible to do live streams. Because you might need more subs to do that. So at this point, I think I'm going to cut the video here, and that will be the end of this video, the end of the Q&A, which I'm going to take a guess. I haven't looked at all the time accumulation, but I'm going to say at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours on this Q&A. That's just a guess. We'll see what it actually ends up being. And then I'll just finish up the video for the main portion, which is the construction of this in more of the tutorial and overview fashion. But, you know, it'd be the Q&A it does work a lot better when there are specific questions that people have asked for the Q&A. I just have no way to make community posts to do that. And I'm really going to have to go over this very well for shorty connections like that one right here. Yeah, I don't know if it's the solder, if it's maybe the solder tip, or but I'm going to guess it's these LEDs that just they don't want to take to the solder very well. I think cleaning off the leads with alcohol and then maybe adding a little bit of flux with a flux pen, that would help, but I think it would only help so much. That's very frustrating that it just doesn't want to take sometimes. And it seems to be random and intermittent too. The top part of this is probably out of frame, but that's not a big deal. You've seen one solder joint, you've seen them all. See, now that one's bridged. I really like the resistors a lot better. The LEDs are a pain. Let's unbridge that one. Come on, there we go. No, I don't want to get out the solder wick again. I'm going to have to. That didn't help at all. I just realized I didn't have the heat turned up for that, or maybe I already turned it down. That one is still bridged. There we go. Huh. Yeah, not spectacular. So I'm going to end this here. I'm going to finish that out on my own. So that is the end of this video. I really appreciate you watching and sticking with me through this Q&A. It's been fun for me. Whether anyone actually watches this or not is probably more of a no than a yes, but such is life. So I'll see you over on the main video, and until next time, see ya.